Hello guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to create a slider widget using the Matplotlib package in Python. So here's going to be the example that I'll be creating. So here you see that I have two sliders widgets here, and the first slider has nothing, there's no functionality, but you can actually just drag the value here in the middle and left and right. And the second slider, so here is the actual slider that will be implementing to control the graph. So here, if I drag the slider to the left, you see that the line series is going to move according to the slider value, which is the y value. The reason why I'm creating two slider widgets is because there's a property called CloseMen and CloseMax, which is a property that you can set to disallow the current slider to have a value less or greater than the value of the, assigned slider. So I'll show you an example later on in the video. But basically this is going to be the example that I'll be creating. And here I have two buttons that's going to reset the sliders back to their original value, as well as here the other button is going to set the slider value to kind of like a specified value that you assign. So let me close the this window here, and to start, so I'm going to import my package and class. So here's my Pyplot module, and here I'm going to import the widgets. And from the widget module, so here we can import the widgets that I want to use. So I'm going to import the slider widget and the button widget. Alright, so we need some dummy data. So here let me create a x and a y variable. And here's my y variable. Alright, so let's go ahead and create our figure and x variables. And I'm going to adjust the layout a little bit. So subplots underscore adjust. So here I'll set my left value to 0.1, and my button value is going to be 0.35. So that way that will have a little bit of room to insert our widgets on the figure window. Okay, and here I'm going to actually assign the plot to a variable. And so I'll set my line width to 2, and I'll set my default line color to blue. And now if we just quickly graph the chart, and this is what we get so far. So on the bottom we have a little bit of room we can place our slider widgets, and on the bottom I have a little room to insert the buttons. And now, and for the plot, it's just a straight line, very simple straight line, and nothing else. All right, so let me do this. I don't like the x labels, so I'm going to reset the labels. And for the x range, I'm going to set from 0 to 10, and for the y-axis range, I'm going to set that to 0 to 100. Alright, so that's our plot. So now we have our plot ready. Now we need to create the widgets. So I'm going to create the slider widget first. And to create the slider widgets, you need to create an axis area. So here I'm going to create an AX slider variable. So I'm going to call this AX slider 1. And here let's just plot the area. So let me set that to 0.1 and 0.2, and here I'm going to set to 0.8 and 0.05. Okay, and now if I just grab this real quick, so here is our slider area. So right now it's still like a second graph looks like, but once you place the widget inside the axis, and those so you'll see what happens. So here if I just create a slider variable, SLDER. And here from the slider class, and for the first slider, I'm going to just provide the minimal requirements. So the first requirements are going to be the AX, and as well as the label name. So for the label name, I'm going to call this slider. Should find slider 1, and we need to set the minimum value. So 0 and to 100, right? So the only thing I'm worried about is we don't have enough space to display the label. And here's saying that X slider is not defined. Oh, there's a typo. Right. So now let me just grab this. And here, I guess the name is fine. So here's our slider widget here. Right. So now let me create the second slider widget. For the second slider widget, I'm going to show you how to use all the properties. So here, let's do the same. So we'll create an X slider variable. And so for this one, I'll set the left value to 0.1 and the bottom value to 0.1. And here for the width, I'm going to set to 0.8, and the height I'm going to set to 0.05. And I'm going to call the slider widget slider 2. And from the slider class, so here I'm going to show you how to use all the property here. And for the first property, it's going to be the AX property, and that's pretty easy. So we'll provide the AX slider 2 variable. And for the label, we'll call this label slider 2. And the VAL min, that's your slider minimum value, and VAL max is going to be your slider maximum value. And if you want to set the slider initial position or initial value, so you want to use the VAL init, and I'll set my initial value to 30. And as well as we can also format our number. So here I'm going to just show an example. So I'm going to format my slider value to 2 decimal points. So here, set my slider value to 2 decimal points. And let me just graph this real quick. So here's our second slider, and so here the slider format is 2 decimal points, and so our initial value or position is 30, and yep, and that's pretty much it. And the minimum and the maximum value is between 0 to 100. Right, so and let's move on. And there's a property called CloseMen, and the CloseMen property indicates whether the slider interval is closed on the bottom, and I'll show you what that means. So here I'm going to set the property value to false, and the default is 2. So let me save this and run the script, and that just means that when you slide your slider to the right, oops, closer, it should be mixed, because our slider is sliding from left to right. Oops, close mix. Oh, should be lowercase mix. Okay, so that means that if you slide your slider to your right, oh, so okay, it's working. So so I'll leave that. I'll come back, and so should me do this. So I'm able to show you a more obvious effect. I'm actually going to set the value step to 10. So that means that when you slide the slider, how many values is going to change when you drag the mouse, and I'll set it to 10. So now if I try again, so here the close mix means that when you slide your widgets, your sliders to your right, so here you see that when I slide my mouse all the way to the right, and when you set the closed mix to false, that means that the slider widget needs to leave a gap at the maximum point. And if I set this back to 2, so if I slide my mouse, drag my mouse all the way to the right, and I can close this gap here. And that's what the close mix property is doing. Right, let me close all the window real quick. And for the next property that I want to show you is called slider mix. So the slider mix property is how should I say this? So from the documentation and the explanation is, do not allow the current slider to have a value less than the value of the slider that you specified. So let me show you example. So from the slider mix, I'm going to basically grab the slider 1 slider variable. I'm going to input that in here and comma. So should mean okay, that should be fine. And now if I just display the graph, and so here let me set the slider 1 to maybe 75 is good. And now if I drag the second slider, you see that because for the slider mix, meaning that when I drag my mouse, my slider values cannot be greater than the value of slider 1. And now if I change the slider 1 value to, let's do 31.64. And now if I click on the slider 2, you see that the slider value changed back to 31.64. I mean that because my slider 2 value, the maximum values cannot be greater than the maximum value of slider 1. And now if I change the same concept applied to slider min. And with the slider min, that means that my slider 2 minimum value cannot be greater than the slider 1 minimum value. So if I actually no, I take that back. Has to be greater than the slider minimum value of slider 1. So here if I change the value of slider 1 to 15, and so my slider 1 value has to be at least minimum 15.04. Alright, so now if I implement, so if I put the slider mix property back, and here I'll provide the slider 1 class name, not class name, the variable name. And so let me close these windows. And so let's do, so if I display the graph, and here I'm going to set okay. So here I can't move my slider 2 right now because from my slider mint and the slider mix property value, I already provide like a value, like a single point value. So always only choose one. So whether you want to use slider mix or slider min, so and that's up to you. And the last property value is going to be the color. So here I can change my my slider color. So here I can use the color property. I'm going to set the color to green. Right. So and that's pretty much for creating the slider on your plots. And now we need to implement the functionality to let the slider to adjust this plot right here. Right, and to do that, so we can use the onChange method. So from I'm going to leave the first slider alone, so I'm not going to implement any functionalities. So from the slider to variable, and there's a onChange function, and it's asking for if you look the parameter, it's asking for a function. And let's go ahead and create a function. So here I'm going to call my function value update. and our parameter is going to be value. And so I'm going to go ahead and just put the function name first. And now when you drag your mouse on the slider, so the unchanged event is going to fire from this value parameter. It knows which slider widget that the value is coming from. So here I can, from the slider to widget, I can grab the value here, and I'm going to assign the slider value to variable y. So let me change that to y value, and to reset the graph, so I'm going to set the y data to y value, and redraw the graph. Alright, so now if we just take a second look at the graph. So here, if I change my slider value, so drag my mouse left and right, you see that the line will basically shift based on my slider 2 value. Okay, so, and that's for the unchanged events. And there's a couple more. Sorry, the video is a little bit long. And so there's two more events. So one is the set value event and the reset event. And this and there's one more. There's a disconnect event. And I'll show you the disconnect event first. So here, from the unchanged event, is going to actually pass a set value. And I'm going to call this set value passed down to the set2 variable. And if you want to disconnect the slider, you can use the disconnect method. So from slider to variable, here we'll use the disconnect method, and here we'll provide the set value. And now if you try to graph when you change the slider value of slider 2, and you see that the graph is not changing, and I don't know why my slider is not working very smoothly. Yeah, let me close this and let me just double check. Close. Oh, here. So let me comment this out. Right, now everything seems to be working much better. Right, so that's how you disconnect the slider widget. Use the disconnect method. And let me comment this out, so I don't want to disconnect my slider. And so let me do this. And to reset the value, and I'm going to create two buttons here. And so let me call this X button 1. And I'm going to place my first button. And the first button is going to be used to reset the slider back to the original value. And for the button 2, I'm going to set the slider to desired value to a value that I specify using the set value method. So here I'm going to call the buttons set value. Okay, and here I'm going to go ahead and create all my functions. The first function is going to be set value. So set value, and my parameter is going to be the value parameter. And from slider to widget, and so here under the set value method, and I'm going to set the value to 50. Okay, and so from the button to on-click events, and I'll provide the function name set value. And for the first button, so the reset button, and I'm going to create a function first. So reset sliders, and it's going to be events. Oops, there's a typo. And here I can basically provide the variable name, the slider variable name. So reset and slider 2 dot reset. Okay. Right, so this is everything. So this is the entire script. And so now if I run the script, and oops, just a typo, button is not defined. Oh, button. Right, let me try again. So here's our complete graph, and here I can I can drag the value of slider 1 and slider 2. And if I click on the reset button, so both slider 1 and slider 2, their value is going to set to the original state. And if I click on the set value button, and you see that slider 2 value set to 50, and using the set value method. Alright guys, so this is everything for the slider widget, and I know it's a little bit long, but this is basically everything you can do with the slider widget, and how to use the property and the slider events. And I hope this video helps, and if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email or leave a comment below. See you guys on the next video. Bye bye.